Hello. Early Music Vancouver season is back, and so are our conversations, intimate conversations, I should say, with our wonderful artists that are coming to us. Today, I have the pleasure to meet with Mélisande McNabney. She will be here playing for us on Friday, September 29th at Christchurch Cathedral. And it is also, interestingly, a production in collaboration with the Vancouver Chopin Society. So Mélisande is with us. Bonjour, Mélisande.
Bonjour. Hi.
So when I heard the Chopin Society, and I know that you're playing generally the pianoforte or the harpsichord, I wonder, so which instrument are you going to play when you're coming to us?
Yes, so I'm going to be playing fortepiano, and it's, I believe, a relatively new instrument. It's been inaugurated, but it's a Graf fortepiano, copy of a Graf instrument by Paul McNulty. And so this is an instrument that's new to me as well, and I'm very excited to discover it.
Wow, but you like adventure and improvisation, so you will have to improvise on an instrument you haven't played before. So I admire you.
No, exactly. It's very stimulating to meet a new instrument. So you have this kind of you have a conversation with the instruments and with the music. So it's a very lively kind of performance when you're meeting a new instrument.
So what is, I don't want to go into too many details, but the difference between a pianoforte and a harpsichord?
Well, there's, keyboard instruments nowadays are standardized in different categories. So we have harpsichord, which is a keyboard instrument with the mechanism that has the plucking of the string. So it has tiny little plectrums that, so how the sound is produced is a plucked string. And you have the forte piano, and then you have the modern piano, which is, the grand piano that you usually see in concerts. And, you know, the forte piano is actually a very broad éventail. So you have many instruments. It's all the historical pianos that evolved. The earliest forte pianos are the same size as the harpsichord. They have 5 octaves and they look like a harpsichord. You can, I want to turn my computer. I'm a bit worried about the noise, but I could show you. This
Oh,
is a forte piano,
I
five
see.
octaves. I'm stopping the movement now. Um, from this instrument, which is a copy of an instrument of Mozart's, all the way to the grand piano, you have, they grow little by little. So every 10 years in the classical period, you had 5 more notes at the top, 5 more notes at the bottom. And so the instrument I'm going to play is a copy of an instrument, I think, from 1820. And it's already an octave bigger than this one. And it looks kind of halfway between this and the grand piano. So they grew every year, basically. Beethoven had at least 5 different sizes of pianos. And, you can play the earliest sonatas on an instrument like this. And then the more you go towards the later sonatas, the bigger instrument is needed to play them.
So before you decided what you were going to play here with that instrument that you will be improvising on,
Yeah.
you had to decide, because now I know that you go from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach to Beethoven.
Yes.
So you decide that this will suit this instrument.
Well, the program would be well suited to an earlier instrument as well, but it's something that I have some flexibility with. Some people that play the fortepiano want the exact piano that was for the exact time, and even the different countries have different styles of piano. So you have Viennese instrument, English instruments, French instruments. And I like to imagine that people, in those days, if they had an instrument at home, they didn't throw it out every 10 years to have a different one. And there's, the instruments were around. And so I'm going to play music that's suited to the Viennese piano that could be played on an earlier piano, but it's you were in the same sound world. It's the same kind of action. So Viennese instruments, they have this very light touch, very clear sound, and even for a later piano, then music is maybe the latest music I'm going to play is from 1802, I think, which is the Beethoven Sonata. So,
we won't go to Chopin, even if it's a
yeah.
Chopin Society. That's interesting.
And
I see you. I see you
yes.
navigate between all those instruments, and I realize that if you are so much at ease with that, it's because I saw somewhere that when you were growing up in your family, there were more instruments than chairs in your house. I mean, everybody was playing an instrument. You were completely living in them.
Yes, there is always some sort of instrument in my dining room. When I was growing up, it was a harpsichord next to the table. And, recently I had this new fortepiano that I didn't really have room for in my house. And it was in the dining room because you always have a nice empty wall in a dining room. And that felt very at home with the piano and the pasta next to it. And you're trying to not splash too much when you're having your dinner. But yeah, I grew up in a musical house, but in with professional musicians at the same time, it's not, we often imagine, oh, they're always, playing music at dinner, but it's not really like that. People have their day jobs and then we do, homework when we get home, and it's
But that being said, your mother also is a harpsichord player,
yes,
and she created her own music series. Wonderful. She just retired from that. Your father, a viola player.
yes.
You have a brother who's a musician, a husband who's a
Yes.
musician. I mean, when you play with Livia Lonzois, the family is around you.
Yes. Yes.
It must be so much at ease in a way. You must be at home when you're playing.
Yeah, it's I feel very lucky actually to have this life and to be able to be in a concert hall and feel, yeah, at home, basically playing music. It's a nice, it's something that I'm used to it, but I still appreciate it every time that I'm in the concert hall, and I feel like, how nice is it to be able to do this in your life?
And I see a spontaneous, a free woman happy to do that. And we sometimes think that it's very rigorous when you want people to have the correct interpretation of everything. But there is way more freedom than we think in early music, no?
Well, that's part of the appeal of early music. And the seriousness is part of every musician's life because it's incredibly demanding, and we have this discipline that needs to be there every day, and that's something that every musician can tell you, that it's a very dedicated, very very difficult, rewarding but very difficult thing to do. But there's so much to what I like with what we call the early music approach, where we're at Early Music Vancouver. It's a very broad term. It's more an approach to music where you incorporate. I like to incorporate, like I do research too. I did a doctorate degree, and that's something that makes the music feel more personal to me. I recorded almost the same program that I'm going to play. I had J.S. Bach and no Beethoven in it. So I'm just moving forward in time a bit as I get more used to the fortepiano. That's something actually that the early music movement in general is doing. It's moving forward in time, even to, Chopin and Schoenberg.
Oh, yeah.
But there's, would I have, recorded a CD of Mozart if I didn't, like, I think there's so many great interpretations of classical music, and for me what makes it sort of makes me feel legitimate in playing it myself when it's already played so much is that I have this personal approach to it. And so when the program that I'm going to play, what I was researching at the time was improvisation, because composers at the time, they improvised. When Mozart played in public, he improvised. Sometimes he played sonatas, but it was not the first thing he was going to do. Beethoven also, he would improvise for people. That's how he performed. That's how he related to the instruments. And that's something that we don't really do, and I was really interested in doing more. And there's this method of C.P. Bach where he teaches you how to improvise a fantasia, and that's the first thing I did when I had my new fortepiano. And it's a nice way to meet the instrument. You do scales, you do little harmonic progressions, and I'm going to incorporate some of that in the recital. So that's a way that I feel like I get closer to how the composer was relating to music in general. And so the pieces that I picked are all fantasias. I have little improvised preludes, some improv myself. That's, still quite structured because it's not something that I don't speak freely. Some classical musicians do more improvisation and that they get quite far with it. I'm still like, a beginner improviser. I have a plan and I like to know where I'm going. And yeah, so that's the approach. I'm going to play some fantasias by Mozart, and I finish with the Beethoven's sonata Quasi una fantasia.
The Moonlight
Sonata. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you see in these pieces the feeling of the composer improvising. So that's what I imagine when I'm performing.
So to make clear, when you take the Mozart piece, for example, you have a prelude. But prelude mean that going to the place. So musicians were preluding in establishing some kind of key and going to the sonata. So you're going to do that with the Mozart.
Yes. And so, Mozart himself, he would improvise. He would not play, a piece in C major and then a piece in G minor because people like to have their ears prepared. It was going to be too much of a shock having two pieces in different keys. So you had to do a modulating prelude to bring your listener's ear comfortably from one key to another to not shock anyone. And that's something that he would improvise. We know he did this, but there are some things that I'm going to play which are really precious documents. They're written down improvisations that he wrote down for his sister. So Mozart's sister, Nannerl, she didn't have this ease in improvising. So she would ask her brother, can you write me a little something? Because I have a recital. She needed to play something. So he wrote for her in a letter, a little prelude. And there's a lot of research done by Robert Levin, who's a pianist, a harpsichordist. So he put together actually that two pieces that were thought to be separate pieces that they actually belong together. And they were part of the same letter to Nannerl. He found one page here, one page there, and they're folded the same way. So he knows these two pages go together. They're not published together in the Bärenreiter edition. But so these preludes, they're really fantastic. You wouldn't imagine that Mozart would play like that. It's not measured. You have things that, it looks like harpsichord music to me. It looks like unmeasured preludes. And so I'm going to play some of these. Some of them I transposed to put them in the right key, but a bit like Nannerl would have done with it. So she has this material from her brother. And she's like, oh, I'm going to use this here between those two pieces and this other little modulating bit here. So I'm going to kind of spread those out to give this idea.
I love this whole approach. It's full of freedom, and you're going to take us by the hand and you're going to take us from one piece to another very naturally. There is one question I had when I looked at the title of your program, though. It is the Silver Apples of the Moon. And the first time I went to the computer to say, where does that come from? I saw that it's the title of a modern composer's album, Martin Subotnick, done in the 60s, but also come from a poem by Yeats, the Irish poet. So why did you select, what is the relationship with those silver apples in your program?
Well, actually, that's the the title was it was done in common. So I think it was Suzy Leblanc's ideas of my program with my program that that brought this this title together. And so my original program was more didn't go all the way to Beethoven, and so we added this Moonlight Sonata. So that's how the title for the concert came to be.
Because in the Yeats poem, there's also the golden apples of the sun. So, but I was wondering,
like there's something with, I don't know why, but with improvising that goes with nighttime, and that's always when I practiced my improvisation. It was always, I had a little baby. Now he's 5 years old, but when I started, I would put him to bed, and I would, after an hour, I had my evening improvising, and that's when it happened. And I was reading also, I think, who was it? I'm trying to remember. it was Hummel, maybe one of those classical composers that was writing about improvising and how it was always at nighttime that he would practice. And there's with the Moonlight Sonata and the improvisation, there's something that's very that just fits. It's this atmosphere.
I would suggest Chopin too, I think, especially when he was at Georges Sand's house in Nohant, and Georges Sand will sleep under the piano to listen to him improvising. So that's something like that. But back to your family, though, I saw somewhere that your grandfather, a great organist, was actually raised improvising, because the organ tradition is to improvise. And when the children were in bed at night, apparently he was continuing to improvise at his organ at home, because he had an organ at home too.
Oh, well, my grandfather, he grew up on a farm. So he is from Saint-Hyacinthe, and he is not the youngest, but he, from a family of, I'm going to say 20 kids, but
Bernard Lagacé.
Yeah. So I think he had a piano, maybe harmonium at home. So he didn't have an organ at home growing up, because he was in the country. But there was an organ at home when my mother was growing up. So maybe I think you have two stories combined, because they had an organ at home, my grandparents, Bernard and Mireille Lagacé. So they bought their first organ. It was one of the first organs built by the builder Helmut Wolff. There's instruments by Wolff all over North America. He died maybe 10 years ago. But Helmut was actually also a member of my family, because he married my grandmother's sister. Okay. So he is my mother's uncle, Helmut. So there's this organ by Helmut Wolff in the living room when my mother was growing up. That organ is now in Montreal at the Salle Bourgie.
Oh, yes.
So we can still hear it. I actually got to play that organ last year for a concert that was dedicated to my mom when she retired from the Salle Bourgie. So.
And I think on that occasion, there were like 11 members of your family all together at the Salle Bourgie?
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. It was,
everybody musicians?
Yeah.
This is unbelievable. Yeah. We had in the past few seasons of Early Music Vancouver, musicians coming normally with their instrument. You see, Thomas Dumford with his lute, and you see Vincent Lausier with his flute, and now we see you just introducing us to this new instrument. Is it something you do often? Because I know that there is a very good instrument that was made for you, or something, at least for Les Voyons du Roi in Quebec at Le Palais Montcalm.
Well, I've been really lucky to play new instruments recently, and that's something that I'm so happy to see, because when you play the harpsichord and the fortepiano, sometimes you can bring your own, but not as far as Vancouver.
No.
And there are some new instruments. So last year I played a new harpsichord that was bought in Sackville in New Brunswick. So I did the inauguration of that harpsichord, and I also played, I played a concerto in Toledo, in Ohio, and they had a new instrument at the orchestra there. So I played some poulenc over there on a new instrument, and it's so nice to see those instruments. And now the piano that I'm going to play in Vancouver, it's by Paul McNulty, and McNulty is, one of the top instrument builders, and I haven't played his instruments since many years, because the last time was when I was studying in Amsterdam. So there's an instrument of his when I started the fortepiano. It was on a McNulty fortepiano at the conservatory in Amsterdam. And and the new fortepianos that I have, my instrument here, and it's the twin of the new instrument of Les Violons du Roi. They were bought together. So we ordered the instruments at the same time. So this is my personal instrument, and Les Violons du Roi bought one, and I went to visit the builder. That's Rod Bergier. So he's in Maine. He's a fantastic instrument builder. So it's a nice relationship, actually, to meet the instrument builders, and not to mention, of course, Yves Beaupré in Montreal, and now his son Benoit is building. They're doing maybe.
And we have Tomlinson in Vancouver as well.
Yeah.
So I hear that, and I said, is there more?
That's the other one. I forgot. I played in Calgary. There's a new Tomlinson harpsichord. I got to play, I think, the first concert on it last year. So yeah.
Does it mean that the instrument is more and more popular? I mean, you see all those instruments coming from everywhere. It's so amazing.
Well, I like to think so. And I think especially the fortepiano, because we didn't used to have many fortepianos in North America. It was, I bought an instrument because I wanted to play it, and I didn't have another option. So I bought a very nice instrument because I knew if I wanted to play this instrument in my life, I needed to have one. The harpsichord, there are some around. You can go to a hall and there's going to be a harpsichord. Not every time, but sometimes. But yeah, the fortepiano, I'm happy to see more and more. There's also a new instrument that's the Salle Bourgie in Montreal. That's a new fortepiano.
Yeah, wonderful hall you have there. So I know that this last summer you were extremely busy. You were everywhere. You were at the Domaine Forget. You were teaching. You had master classes, everything. Very full schedule. Do you also continue to go to Europe? You studied in Amsterdam. Do you have a career in Europe as well?
No, I haven't been to Europe. It's something that I didn't maintain. I have a 5-year-old son, and the last years were mostly, trying to keep my head above water and have have my career over here. So I'm based in Quebec City. I play a lot with Les Violons du Roi, and I do my solo playing in North America. It's something that you have to put in the time, and you have to be away from home. So it's definitely something that I want to pursue in the coming years.
Fortunately, you have 2 CDs out.
Yes.
The first one about 4 years ago, less improvisatory, I would say. And the second one, more French harpsichordist, the first one. And the second one, Fantasias. It has the same flavor of the concert that we're going to see today. Yes. And it's more German music as well.
Yes.
And I know that the praise is very high on those concerts, or those recordings. So at least we can hear it this way. Well, Mélisande, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. One last question, because I always ask myself, why did they call you Mélisande? Why didn't you become an opera singer or something else?
I wish I could sing. I really don't have the voice. I love to sing, but it's something that, everybody needs to work a lot to, become the musician that they are. But if I wanted to do voice, I think I would have a lot of work to do to make it work.
But your parents obviously loved French opera, no?
Yes, I think, the Péléas et Mélisande, I think my father was playing one of them. Was it one of the suites? Was it the Schoenberg? Was it the opera? I think my father was playing it. I was born in Quebec, so my father, so Douglas McNabney, he's a violist. He was principal viola of the Quebec Symphony when I was born. They were playing some Péléas et Mélisande. Apparently I didn't have a name for a couple of weeks, maybe a few days. And then, it was my father who
well, at one point, a few weeks after the baby is born, you look at the baby and you say, oh yeah, Mélisande should be the name.
Yeah. So
you look like a Mélisande.
So it was music related, not specifically to the opera itself. Like there's no story with the opera, but I think it's just one of those musical names. And it's funny because I used to be a bit shy about my name because I was a shy kid, and it's difficult to say and people don't know how to spell it. And one time even though I still felt a special connection with the opera Péléas et Mélisande, it's so beautiful, and I listened to it a lot because it had my name. And we went to the Opéra de Montréal. It was many years ago when they did this production of Péléas et Mélisande. And I went with my mom, who's she's a very sociable person, and at the intermission she was introducing me to everybody, and I got so embarrassed, and I went to hide in the bathroom because
by the way, your mother is Isolde.
Yes. No, I know. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Mélisande, it's a joy. Yeah. I can't wait to see your fingers improvising on this beautiful instrument. Thank you for coming to us.
Thank you so much for having me for this interview, and I can't wait to come to Vancouver.
Thank you. So that was the Intimate Conversations with Mélisande McNabney. 29th of September, she will be here at Christ Church Cathedral with this beautiful instrument.